I just said, hey, it'd be interesting to me if you'd attend a church. What would you think about that? I wasn't prepared for his answer. He said, there's no way I would do that. I know that if I ever physically went to a church, I would get ill. That is really interesting to me. What would make you say that? And he said, I would never want to go to a place where it's all about punishment.
This week on the Reach Podcast. All right, welcome back to the Reach Podcast. This week, I am joined by a good friend of mine, Nate Eckelberger. Nate is our area director for Search Ministries in Austin, Texas. And Nate, it is so great to have you on the podcast today. Thanks for being here.
Awesome. Excited.
Yeah, well, you should be excited.
Yeah.
You got some great stuff to talk about. So what are we talking about today? Tell us about the story or the conversation that we're going to think through.
Yeah, man, I've got a new friend named Miller that I've really enjoyed, a young guy, and we're going to just hear kind of a little brief synopsis on our conversation.
Okay, so tell us, how'd you meet Miller? What was the connection there?
Yeah, so in Austin, I am inviting all of my friends to make sure that if I need to be introduced to someone and meet new people, that I want to do that. And one of my friends of about 20 years said, hey, there's a young guy that I want you to meet. I like him. I think you'll like him. And I think he's in an open spiritual place. And, of course, that's all I needed to hear. We got together, had a great time. And right away, I liked this guy. I think he's 22, 23. And I saw a lot of myself, my young self in this guy.
Tell him. Remember, this is going on the internet, but give him a little flavor of the young Nate that you see in Miller.
Awesome. So I didn't grow up in the church. I didn't grow up thinking that God was that important, and I didn't come to faith until midway through my 24th year. I was 24, and I came to faith after trying it my way completely, and realized that just didn't work. And that's kind of where I see him at. He's 22. And he's definitely trying it his way, but in a fun way. And so I did a lot of partying, and my way was going to be independence. It was going to be on me and through me and by me, and I was going to be the main character. And that came to an end at some point. But what I really thought was interesting is as soon as we started talking, he was telling me about a used kayak he was going to get off Facebook Marketplace. It was just this great deal, and right away he was speaking my language. So I love to get a great deal, and
you love everything outdoors and physical.
I do, and just knowing that was important. Yeah. So he'd done a little bit of jiu-jitsu, and so it's just one of these places where at first, that's what when we're talking about. Having spiritual conversations with who we think are probably lost people, that just finding common ground is a key point. Like they're not a project to me. This isn't a puzzle to figure out. This is truly getting some common ground in a way that seems actually real and natural, authentic. And so he'd done some jiu-jitsu before, and I love that. He was getting, he was more excited about the deal, maybe even than the kayak. And so I love that. And so I'm always trying to do that. Right now I'm trying to, get a couch for my son who's getting married, and I'm on the hunt, for just an amazing couch at a great deal. And I can talk about that for a while, but so the idea is that right away I felt like this is someone I would want to spend time with and have great conversations with. And we had a great conversation. And what I found interesting about the first time we met was he was pretty open about talking about God, like God in a way of, and I believe he's a 12-stepper, kind of doing the steps. And so I think, in that sense of like a higher power type God, just something bigger than me that he believed in. And so I was just curious about, when he talks about God, and he's pretty quick to do it, what does he mean by that? And so I've found that I can't assume that they're talking about the same God that I'm talking about usually. So I'm curious about that. And I find out that for work, he's a barista at a pretty hip, cool coffee shop in Central Austin. And I learned a long time ago from some guys that do this kind of thing is that rather than randomly going to coffee shops around town, pick a couple and stick to them and get to know the people there. And so I've done that, and so I've got a meeting on Tuesday mornings in South Austin, and then I have another group in Central Austin on Tuesdays, and so I've got about a 2.5 hour gap on Tuesdays that I usually will just post up at a coffee shop and do some work and do some calls, and this happened to be right in between my regular groups, and so I thought, hey, if that's where he works, this works for me. And I'm gonna start hanging out there and just seeing him. And so
I
that's
love the intentionality of that.
I want to be intentional about this. And so I'm asking my believer friends to be intentional with these one or two people that they feel like they have favor with in this season. With God, and so intentional means time and maybe money and headspace and thought, and so it just I think intentional means a lot of things, and so I started going there regularly and not giving him not trying to give him a hard time because he's working, but just he's seeing that I'm actually working, I'm doing some stuff, and when he has a break, I would just chat him up at the coffee shop, and he seemed to enjoy it. And again, this a couple of conversations in, and he's enjoying me. I think that's another point that it's like when we're doing this, we talk about favor, and we're on the lookout, I think, for folks that seem to be reciprocating our affection for them, and he seemed to like our conversation. He liked what I would chat him up about, and I got to learn that his girlfriend also worked at the coffee shop. And she seemed to like me too, and sometimes I'd go in and he wouldn't be there and she would be there, and she seemed genuinely happy to see me, and it sounded like they talked about me when I wasn't around. Like just we were having some rapport, we were building some rapport, okay, and I'm starting to feel that, and because he's open to the God conversation, and they're young, I just said, hey. It'd be interesting to me if you'd attend a church that I want to attend, and it's a really young church full of young people, and the pastors are young. What would you think about that? And I wasn't prepared for his answer. He said, "There's no way I would do that. That I know that if I ever physically went to a church, I would get ill." And I was really surprised by that answer, but I think more surprised was I curious, and I think that was a great place for me to be.
Well, yeah. So why did he say that? I'm sure you guys talked about it.
Yeah, we did talk about it, and but I think what I would encourage folks is when things like that happen in a conversation. I feel like I could have easily allowed that to shut down the conversation and feel like, oh, that's a closed door. Maybe I wasn't reading things right. I'm going to have to regroup. And my response, I think, because I'm trying to be intentional, was actually curiosity, and really an authentic curiosity. I was like, man, that is interesting. That's an interesting answer. And I didn't try to get him to dig in and defend himself. Like, I think you could go a couple ways. I could have been like, oh, there's no reason for you to do that. You shouldn't feel that way. You're wrong. And said, let me show you how I'm right around a church like that. And I was just curious. And so I said, man, that, like you said, what would make you say that? And I said, that is really interesting to me. What would make you say that or feel that? And he said, I've thought about this a lot, and I would never want to go to a place where it's all about punishment. And I thought, wow, okay, that's where we get into, when you think of the 1, 2, 3 of search, when you think about an emotional barrier, the 3 is just, the 3 barriers many of us have to faith. And that first barrier of this emotional barrier is really interesting, that there's this wall for Miller of like those places speak about and almost celebrate punishment, and I would not want to be there.
Yeah, and when he says that, is he talking about punishment, like the church punishing people who go there, or theology, or what does he mean by that?
Yeah, he didn't unpack that. I assumed he meant, kind of the old school fire and brimstone type of, you're going to hell, and you're just, everything about you is wrong, and the main message is you're bad. Everything you do is bad, and bad things are going to happen to you. Maybe that's just my bias, but I didn't really follow up on what do you mean by that. But I stayed curious, and I lived for the next conversation. And we talked to people a lot about that. We don't have to fix this right now. A question I often ask myself is, do I need to say anything or do anything? And sometimes not doing something or saying something is the right way to go. I didn't have to. What I didn't want is for him to dig his heels in and to strengthen his position in that. I was just curious, and I said, okay, that's really interesting. I think I did say something like that hasn't been my experience, and I think there could be a place where you'd be surprised. But I let it go, and we shifted the conversation to something else. Often when I would go, he would be working, and we were just having an over-the-counter conversation. One time I was working on some things where I'm doing some inner work on some of my relationships and trying to figure out my marriage. I want to be a better husband and have a great marriage. So I was taking some time to really think through what I could do in my marriage to help it, and he said, "Hey, I'm going to get a break in a few minutes. Would you mind if I sat with you?" And it was the first time this has happened.
Okay.
And so we sat down in his own coffee shop, and he asked me what I was doing, and I let him in on the fact that I'm working on my relationship. I'm really taking a look at where I maybe don't have some great thoughts around things and could make some new decisions. And there's this idea of new decisions and new ways of thinking that kind of just maybe inspired me to say, hey, I'd love to get together with you outside of the coffee shop and maybe have coffee in another coffee shop where you could unpack with me kind of how you got to where you got to around that question I asked you around church. And he was, surprisingly, he was really excited about that. He said he'd love to.
But they're not going to make the coffee as good as I do, though.
Right, yeah. He does make some pretty good coffee. And so that was one thing I learned is that if we tell ourselves stories that these people are not going to want to talk about it, they're going to be upset by our questions. I think for me, just being open to what if it goes better than I think? What if he was genuinely excited to get together with me? And so we did, and we met for close to 2 hours at a different coffee shop, and he unpacked for me how he got there, and then what he currently feels is his world, his world philosophy, his world vision, is how he sees God play out in his life. And it was, very, very interesting, very eye-opening, very unique. And I think what's important to say about that, as we're talking about just spiritual conversations, is I let him share with me kind of how he sees things. And it was very unique. And my questioning was because it was so unique, and I think something that he feels like is something he has been able to find himself. So he's not one of the 5 major religions types of guy. I would say it sounds something like he made up that feels right to him. And so my question to him in it is because I really wanted to understand it. How does it work? What are the boundaries?
Yeah.
In a way, and my questioning was more of like, if you were going to teach another young person this world philosophy, what would you teach them about it? How would they understand how it really works? Because it was a little, broad and deep, and the way he started was, do you see that bird over there? Do you know what that type of bird is? And I didn't. And he told me what it was, and told me that is a non-native species to this area, and most people would say it should not be here. And then he pointed out a tree. He asked me what type of tree, if I knew that was. I'm not a tree guy, and he knew. And he's like, "Now that is supposed to be here. That is a native tree, and it's supposed to be here." And he let that pause sit for a while, like that. I should get that. And what he said next was, "Now, what I believe is because they're here, they're supposed to be here, and all is right." And that's how I see all of this, that it's all right. It's all where it's supposed to be. I'm where I'm supposed to be, and I can just lean into that. And that really is the God in everything. So my questioning was trying to, kind of understand, mostly so we could have a good conversation about it, and I could see where we had some common ground where we differed, of trying to get him to share, how would you instruct a younger person into your worldview so that they thought like you. And actually, he didn't have any appetite for that. He was happy that it was just his way of thinking, and all really not even interested in offering it to another person, that it wasn't for him to even share with others. So that became pretty interesting. So from there, I said, "Hey, how about this? What would you think about this? You remember a few weeks ago that I invited you to this church experience. I really thought you would like it. What if you didn't go to like it? You didn't go because I wanted you to. And if you came and you did get physically ill, you could leave." And I try not to be funny about that. I was trying to be really authentic. If you really think you're going to get sick, you could leave. Would you attend it just to tell me what you thought? And what you experienced, and maybe to see if it's just a little bit different than you think it might be. Would you be open to that? And very quickly he said, "I would love to do that."
Really?
Which I was surprised, because he seemed so against it even a few weeks ago. But as we talk about these conversations, I see, he and I are having a conversation over multiple weeks and multiple days. A conversation, doesn't start the moment I walk into that coffee shop, and 21 minutes later when I leave, and that's a conversation. I'm trying to start to think of it in ways like, we're having this conversation over time that does build, and he remembers things that got said and how I reacted to them, and we're feeling each other out. And I know he knows that I really like him.
Yeah.
And so I pop in, and when he's not there, I tell his girlfriend to tell him I said hi, and I'm thinking about him, and I make an intentional thought to get over there and see him as often as I can. And so I'll finish it up saying that we decided to go. It's a Saturday night service. It's 6:00. They call it the Rowdy Six. It's a lot of young people.
Very Austin.
I love it. It's a very Austin thing.
Yeah.
It's high energy. It's awesome. But 2 hours before, I get the text that I thought I was probably going to get. "Hey, bro, my girlfriend's in the emergency room, and she's getting some tests done, and I think she's going to be done, but I don't know. But I should still be there at 5:45. I just wanted to let you know I might be late." And man, I thought,
Whoa.
he wants to be there. I think, partly because we've built a friendship and we're being authentic with each other. But God is drawing him, I believe. I think, we talk about, God's responsible for the results, and I had to let go. I invited, I asked, I encouraged, and I let go of the results of the invitation. And it seems like God is drawing him to this thing. And so even with his girlfriend at the emergency room, he shows up. And he is dressed up more than I've ever seen him.
Huh.
He's not wearing a cap, which I've never seen him without a cap. And so I just thought that was interesting. Like people have their ideas of church, and that they know what they think it's going to be. And so he dressed up, which was fine. When we got into the service, what I was looking for is how he experienced it. He laughed in appropriate times. He clapped to the music. I think I saw him wipe a tear away at one point. And like I told you earlier, he's in the 12-step program. They brought in a guest speaker from another state for a one-off message, and this guy was in recovery, a former addict, and God just put these two together. And after we got done with the service, I jokingly said, "Hey, we made it," and he laughed. He thought that was funny. But a guy that he knew came over and said, "Miller, I didn't know you came here." He goes, "Oh, it's my first time. I'm just checking it out." He's like, "Well, you're gonna love it. I come every Saturday night," and that was just an awesome little touch, you know, from God. So, what's great about that conversation, I think, is I experienced the curiosity and not a stumbling block. I let time go by and let the conversation play out. I invited and encouraged and then offered it as an experiment and not as something of like, will you do this for me? Or something where he could see that if he said no, the friendship might be over. I think that's one thing that we worry about is, am I going to kill the friendship by one of these things? Yeah. And I don't tend to do that. And we're having an ongoing conversation about what he experienced at the service.
Yeah. I think it's awesome, man. It's a great, you kind of flip the script too. You're like, hey, give me feedback on this.
Yeah.
What's it like for you to come here? And I'm open to anything, whatever it is. And it sounds like it turned into something great. And we'll see what God does with y'all and him and all this in the days ahead and the years ahead. It's going to be fun to see. So, Nate, thank you, man. Great stuff. I really, really can't thank you enough for sharing all that on the podcast.
Love it.
Thanks for listening to the Reach Podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, subscribe so you don't miss the next one. That'd be a good idea. Share it with a friend and leave us a review to help others find the podcast. Now, for more resources, please visit reachothers.org and follow us on Facebook and Instagram, and we'd love to hear from you.